everyone. Welcome to Culture Binge, where we feast on the zeitgeist and ever so essentially regurgitate it for you, our dear listener. For everyone watching live, thanks for joining in. I'm here with Wisecrack researcher Serby. Hey, Serby.
Hi.
And a very special guest we love so much, we just keep asking him to come back. It's Wisecrack writer, Wisecrack host. It's the Prince of Perspiration.
Ooh.
That one's new. Yeah. Dr. Michael Burns.
Hi. That was really good, by the way. That was really good.
Thank you. My name is Alec. I run the Wisecrack content team with Jared. A lot of the people were asking what I do while I'm here. Jared is parasailing in somewhere. So we got a lot of cool stuff to talk about today. Serby is tackling the timeless question, can people have friends of the opposite sex and not smash? I'm going to talk about mindfulness and how it's all ploy to get you to work harder for free. And Michael, you're talking about Seinfeld?
Seinfeld as a way to talk about the things we watch when we watch streaming services.
Okay. What's the deal with Seinfeld? We'll get there. Yeah, I thought about that long and hard. All right. Before we continue, I want to let you all know about the South Park podcast, Respect Our Authority. That is with Jared. If you're missing your Jared, you can get him every single week with Ryan and a lot of cool other people. It's coming back September 26th. Every week they'll be discussing the latest episode of season 23. Subscribe now. It's wherever you listen to podcasts. That means iTunes. That means Google Play. That means Spotify. That means Castbox. That means I'm trying to think of like a really one no one knows about.
Luminary. You can listen to podcasts there.
Luminary, whatever that is. I don't know if we're on that. But anyway, the link is in the description. Thank you all for dealing with me pitching stuff. But yeah, check it out. And the first thing we'll do, the first thing on our agenda is the worst name segment. I hate saying it more and more every week. What slaps this week and what's chapping your ass? That is, what do we like and what do we hate? Let's start with Dr. Hot and Sweaty.
Okay. For slaps, I'm going to go with something that's not current, but something that I just watched all of and was very obsessed with. So what slaps for me is this TV show, Joe Pera Talks With You on Adult Swim. I don't know if anyone else has seen it. I had heard about it and I watched it all in one go. And I think it's been out for a year, and I'm so mad at myself for the 364 days that it wasn't in my life. It's a show where comedian Joe Pera plays a version of himself he describes as a soft-handed choir teacher from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a earnest, absurdist comedy show. It's good. You should watch it. And on YouTube, they have one episode up for free that's called Joe Reads the Church Announcements.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. And then what chaps is, okay, so you know the 16-ounce bottles of pop or soda or carbonated beverages, whatever we call them? You buy like a plastic one?
Okay. Yeah, we call them soda.
Soda, okay.
Like Americans.
Like Americans, great. We're here. I'm really mad at them. I bought one yesterday because I needed a little late afternoon pick-me-up. I think those are gross because it's plastic, so it doesn't keep the temperature right. And if it's hot out, you take 3 sips and the damn thing is hot and you just have warm soda. And I think there needs to be a better design for things like this. And who's actually finishing that? Because if you're finishing it, you're either chugging 16 ounces of soda or you're drinking like warm, corn syrupy Coke dregs. I just think it's a bad design and we should be able to do better as a society. So that's what chaps.
Can you like pour it into a hydro flask or something?
Yeah, but I think that's what you have to do, right? If you want a proper soda experience, you need a cup or something with ice in it that you pour it over. I think uniced soda is just gross. Why are we doing it? I don't know.
It's disgusting.
I like temperature extremes. Like when I drink something, I either want it really cold or really hot, like if it's tea. So something like lukewarm, like if I drank that, I would think that it was already in someone's mouth and then they poured it back into the bottle.
They might. Who knows?
Great. Serby, what about you?
So what slaps is that I just finished watching The Patriot on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
And I
What's that about?
It's so good. It's about this non-official cover spy guy, and he does all these shenanigans and he goes all over Europe to do different things. And I love it because it combines espionage with folk music. And I love spy stuff and I love folk music. But what kind of chaps is that I just found out it was canceled.
Oh,
So I'm like, what? 2 seasons? And it was highly rated. So I'm not sure why Amazon canceled it, but that was very sad. However, it still slaps because it was so good and it was really funny. It's like a dark comedy. And the
Can we
guy
shout
just did
out?
such a good job in it.
I just want to shout out my friend Zev, who worked on that show and wrote on season 2.
thanks,
Really?
Zev.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And
Tell Zach
he
I
was sad
love
that
the
it got
show.
canceled too. It was really under the radar, but so good.
It's so good and so funny. And there were like these like small moments that would just have me like with tears running down my face because it was so, so funny. Oh, I loved that show. Anyway, I'm very sad. And what chaps, I have a little bit of a rant to go on, so bear with me.
Love rants.
So Forbes released a list of the 100 most innovative leaders in the United States. And out of
Anyone know?
100 leaders, they only included one woman,
Mm.
Barbara Rentler, the CEO of Ross Stores. So out of all of the leaders, all of the CEOs, every incredible person, they only thought that one woman was innovative enough to make their list.
Hmm.
A single woman. Forbes has acknowledged that they blew it and they gave the chief content officer gave this like really lame excuse saying that there are fewer women in leadership positions. That's not an excuse. Try harder. And I'm just appalled that this list made it through like all of the revisions, like during every brainstorming session. So since Forbes failed to highlight female innovators, I'll share a few. So Dr. Julie Lin Wang is an expert in 3D printing, robotics, and telemedicine. She designed a solar-powered 3D printer system so small that it can fit inside of a carry-on bag, which makes it possible for medical supplies to be printed in hard-to-reach areas around the world or even space. Felicia Kukuru is the CEO and co-founder of Binge, an app that has helped social workers approve foster and adoptive families for thousands of children. And Susan Wojcicki is the current CEO of YouTube and happens to be a co-founder of Google. So Forbes, do better. We are in 2019. We are not in the 1950s.
Thanks, Serby.
Real talk.
I have a lot more petty things to talk about. So as far as my slaps, I'm cheating. One is just reiterating what Michael said a few weeks ago, which is I finally got to watch The Righteous Gemstones in A++. It's so good. I think I'm one episode behind. But also what I really want to shout out is I've been trying to listen to a lot more new music recently because I listen to the same music I've been listening to for a decade now. And I found someone sent me a channel called My Analog Journal where this guy just has two turntables and like picks a theme like 70s jazz from Japan and just does like a 30-minute like, different tracks from different albums. He'll also do like Turkish singers or like, groovy Arab jams from like the 1960s or something like that. So just like very weirdly specific, and I'm really into it. And also, as someone who ashamedly loves those like lo-fi hip hop to study relax to things with like the relaxing person with a coffee and a cat. It's a real person, but it's like that similar vibe of just like a person drinking coffee, spinning vinyl. God, people are gonna hate me for that. And then as far as chaps, I don't want to be too negative about this because I've only seen one episode and I'm willing to watch a few more. But I watched the first episode or one episode of Diagnosis, that show where people have mystery medical illnesses. I think the woman who's on it was the inspiration for or consulted on House. But anyway, the episode I watched, this guy he experiences deja vu and then his heart stops for 6 seconds. That's crazy. Why the fuck would that happen? So the whole episode, you think there's going to be some epiphany where it's like you got this rare disease plus this rare disease, which like interact in this crazy way that makes your heart stop. That doesn't happen. He goes to therapy because he had a traumatic childhood. And then like it's kind of linked to his stress. So if he's stressed out, it's more likely to happen. So he goes to therapy and reduces the amount of times it happens, and then it just ends. And I'm very happy that the guy is like got his shit under control. But from a narrative perspective, I'm just mad that the mystery wasn't solved. So
sound like you have bloodlust and you're mad that he's okay. Wait, Alec, if I could ask you that music thing you talked about, where is that? Maybe I missed it.
It's on YouTube. Sorry.
YouTube.
It's
Okay,
just
cool.
my analog. Let me double check that. Make sure I'm not
Well, I
plugging
just
something
imagine
else.
myself and a host of listeners all heard that and was like, "Oh, it sounds good," and we want to find it. So
Yeah,
Does he
yeah.
take requests?
I don't know. I really don't. I've watched like 3 or 4 videos, and I've listened to the Japanese jazz from the '70s vinyl set
sounds
several
awesome.
times. If you want to search for that, called Coffee Break Sessions. But yeah, super cool.
That's really cool.
All right, so that's what I've got to complain about. For the first topic, Serby is talking about. What are you talking about, Serby?
I'm talking about opposite sex friendships.
The
So,
premise of When Harry Met Sally.
yes, exactly. So, the Journal of Relationships Research recently published a study on the thoughts of people whose romantic partners have best friends of the opposite sex. So, researchers found that the people who are engaged to be married view these friendships more negatively than married, single, or dating people. They also found that people who negatively view cross sex best friendships are more likely to lash out at their partners rather than communicate constructively when they feel threatened by the best friend.
So wait, what group is most likely to be pissed about their partner having a friend of the opposite sex?
The engaged people.
The engaged people. Interesting. Interesting.
So, one of the reasons why that is that researchers hypothesize that when you're engaged, you're going through this significant period of change. So, you're going from being a single person to a married person. There's also a lot of like family considerations, there's a wedding to plan. So, in times of high stress, oftentimes anxiety spikes, which can maybe lead to jealousy. So, that's one reason why the engaged people are more anti-cross-sex best friendships. So this is a two-part discussion, and I'd like to focus on the friendship aspect right now. So I have two questions for you. One, what has been your experience with female friends? And can men and women really have platonic friendships?
You want to start, Michael?
Sure. Oh yeah, you totally can. I've had good female friends. I think most of my adult life. I even had a period in early high school where I was that guy that probably, I don't know, had like too many female friends or something. I don't know. I think a lot of this boils down to jealousy. I've been in a relationship for almost 7 years. I have good friends that are women. One of my best friends in the world is a woman. And whenever me and my partner are both in Chicago, I will go out and like have dinner and drinks and just hang with my female best friend. And my partner doesn't care or get jealous or weird. Same way, my partner has some really good male friends. They hang out and I don't care. I just think this, like, to me, I don't know, that sort of jealousy boils down to some weird heteronormative pseudo-religious thing where we like own our romantic partners, and if like the fear of their genitals not being in our sight fills us with dread or something. That whole thing to me just sounds so like antiquated, you know? I don't know. I don't buy that like you can't be or you shouldn't be, or shouts to Billy Crystal in the first act of When Harry Met Sally, but don't agree.
I think I've been on both sides of it. In high school, I was like really nerdy, absolutely no self-esteem, like big chubbers, who was also had way too many female friends. And I probably wanted to sleep with most of them, but was like too afraid to ever voice that. So I was just actually like a good, not creepy friend to them. Like I didn't try anything or creep on them or anything like that. I was, very respectful. And I would like to think I'm not that person anymore, but I still have a ton of female friends. So I think generally it's dumb, but I guess like another aspect is, so yes, I think it's totally possible. I think lots of people have friends of the opposite sex. Sometimes there's friends that like maybe you hook up once, really drunk, and then you all realize it's super awkward and never do it again, and you're even better friends, right?
That's a real thing, and it's pretty adult to be able to just like separate those two and keep it moving. And it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think like other proof of this is that like if you talk to like gay men hang around lots of other gay men and they have lots of like people that they could be theoretically sexually attracted to, but it's not like gay men have their one boyfriend and are like, I can't have any other friends, or like gay women on the same side. So yeah, seems dumb.
So I This topic is very, like, I'm very passionate about this topic because my entire life has been filled with wonderful, meaningful friendships with men, but
You're
they
welcome. I'm kidding.
all they always end because the girlfriends or the fiance or wives will eventually, excuse me, feel uncomfortable with our friendship, and the guys will stop talking to me. So
That's trash.
it's so sad. And it's important to note that I'm extremely respectful and mindful of the friendship, and I would never do anything that's inappropriate or untoward. So when these guys stop talking to me eventually, I go through this mourning period, and it's devastating, I think. Like, there was one, the last one that happened was in business school. I was really good friends with this guy, and for 2 years we were really, really close. And then eventually, when we graduated, like maybe 9 months after, he just stopped responding to my text messages. And I heard through the grapevine that he stopped because his girlfriend felt uncomfortable. So I've always felt like men and women can be friends, but from my experience, I always see my friendships with men as temporary because I've never had like a long lasting friendship with a man without their partner feeling uncomfortable.
But you know
Those
what I
partners
think?
suck.
Yeah.
They suck.
Well, the partners suck. And I guess the dudes suck a little bit for complicity. But, like, you know what I think dudes do sometimes? And maybe this is me sounding a little too, like, old school, grew up in the 90s type. I think sometimes dudes can have a tendency to, like, I guess you'd call it, like, hip pocket a woman. So, like, have, like, a friendship with a woman, but in the back of their mind, the dude, because dudes are, like, all about, like, fiscal scarcity. So it's like, well, I might have a partner now, but they're probably going to leave me eventually. So when the market's down, I need another option. Because I think I've talked to male friends before, knowing I'm that good of friends with. I think it's a thing that insecure men can do, like use female friendship as a way to have a little, like, make themselves feel good, and especially if it's someone who they maybe like have had like a flirty thing with in the past. I'm not saying that your male friends have done this, but I think that's like a thing that happens sometimes. And it's not good.
I don't think it always needs to define. There might be just friends you have who are like, you know, if my girlfriend cheated on me or dumped me or something like that, I got some ideas of where my life could go.
Which I guess is okay, right? Because, like, I guess why wouldn't you, if you were, the people you're friends with should be people you love spending time with, that you're intellectually engaged by, that you can be emotionally open with. Like, things that would also be good in a romantic partner. Often the only difference between a good friend and a good romantic partner is that you actively want to reproduce with one, or at least carry out the act of reproduction. So, yeah. Oh, it seems shitty. Have you ever, like, talked to any of those dudes? Sorry to get personal. Have you ever had, like, any post-mortem conversations where you're like, yo, dude, we were
So I
homies
tried,
and now we're not?
but they just won't respond.
That's
Like, I've sort of
wild.
said, like, hey, I'm going to be in town, or like, do you want to catch up? It's been so long, and no response. Or it'll be like, oh no, we just kind of grew apart. It's nothing. Like, there was nothing. And it's like, we used to talk almost every day. How can you say that we grew apart or that you're busy?
Did you used to wear, like, T-shirts that said, "I'ma steal your man" on them every time you met any of these guys' partners?
I mean, I'm going to start.
See? That's
I
crazy.
don't know.
Can't you just
Yeah.
tell them that you only want a billionaire? So, like, don't worry. I mean, unless all your friends are billionaires.
No, and that's the thing. It's like, listen, if you're rich, yeah, I might take you. But like
So you should be like, listen,
I'm
honey,
kidding.
your man is broke trash. He's fun to hang out with, but he would need 5 more zeros in his bank account before I would even think about a first date.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's interesting because as soon as I find out that someone, first of all, I'm exceptionally picky and like there's nobody I'm ever interested in. But if I find out that someone is in a relationship, all attraction, all interest, anything dies. It's like you become like a wet sponge to me. Like, oh, okay.
Wait,
Like there's
that's
nothing
not
there.
an attractive thing. A wet sponge.
Not to me.
Some people would disagree.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
was there a second part to this?
Yes. So
Tell
the
me about the
second
second part.
Electra Gilchrist-Petty, one of the researchers of the study, hypothesized that pop culture narratives often found in movies such as When Harry Met Sally, My Best Friend's Wedding, and Zack and Miri Make a Porno reinforce this idea that people should be on their guard when their partner has a cross-sex best friend. She said, Heteronormative assumptions have historically socialized us to consider men and women as romantic or sexual partners. Hence, individuals tend to have at least an understated assumption that the friendship between men and women can evolve into something more than a benign friendship. So, do you think that this is the cause? Like, are we socialized by media to feel uncomfortable or skeptical of cross-sex best friendships?
I don't think it's just like I think media is probably reflecting on something older, and I'm kind of talking out of my ass a little bit, but like you can imagine old social norms about like courting and women that like really the only acceptable way like in the days where if you were hanging out with a woman you needed a chaperone, right? Like that was a thing, right? Because the assumption was that you would start to smash, or that like it was even inappropriate to have these like cross-sex friendships, like those all existed. So I imagine like when Harry Met Sally comes along and all these other movies, it's really just like that idea kind of erodes and like, okay, we don't need chaperones and like people can be friends. But so now it's not that it's sort of verboten, it's that, oh, it's risky. And to be like completely fair, yeah, like sometimes people either have a plan B or they're like trying to get, they're trying to creep on their friend in a way to like under the cover of friendship. So that kind of stuff does happen. But I think, like if you suspect your partner of being like that anyway, why would you be with them? I guess no one expects their partner cheating on them.
Well, well, I guess the other thing in the media, though, is anytime there is, and it always tends to work this way, a woman who's like one of the guys, friends with the guys, eventually at a certain point in the movie, she removes her glasses and shakes her hair. And one of the other gals is like, come on, Tracy, let me give you a makeover. It'll be fun. And she walks out of the bathroom and all the guys are like, whoa, Kelly, I've never seen you this way before. And then all of a sudden, the cool female friend is now the object of desire because every cool female friend is just waiting to be like polished up until she's ready for heterosexual consumption. So I think that like on both sides, like all the media narratives are either men and women can't be friends because eventually they want to have sex, or any friend you have is just like waiting to be glowed up and ready for you. And I don't think that's like true. But I think a lot of the formative media that millennials grew up with have that. And in any time there is a friendship, and there's examples of this that are not, I'm not going to say accurately because I can't remember the names of shows, but it's always like the gay best friend. So whenever there is a, different opposite sex friendship, it's like the quirky gay friend that hangs out with the gals or whatever it might be.
I agree. I think that it's what you said about the formative media consumption. And I think we're all shaped by the media, like whether it impacts our body image or our self-esteem or our ideas of what a relationship should be like. I think that when millennials watch or young people watch these television shows or these like teen dramas, and we see that men and women can't be friends without it turning into a sexual relationship, it impacts us. Because I remember growing up with watching movies and feeling like, oh, so like he's interested in her. And even if it doesn't turn into anything, he's still interested in her. She's interested in him or jealous that he has a girlfriend. So.
Well, the one big exception to all this, of course, is Jerry and Elaine. I know we're getting to that later, but we do have a media example of a male and female friendship that lasted over, 10 seasons and started after the sexual encounter.
Right. I was going to say, didn't they date? But yeah.
They did, but they were able to just move past it and it never comes up again.
Yeah. All right. With that, I think we should switch gears to mindfulness. So first of all, mindfulness as a definition, what are we talking about? Mindfulness, as you probably heard of, is the practice of being present and aware either of yourself, surroundings, feelings, emotions, whatever. You can use mindfulness to talk yourself out of an anxious mood or kind of negativity. You can mindfully eat. That's when you like eat a Hershey's Kiss and pay attention to the texture of it and the taste and the way it feels on your tongue and all this. It's actually good as an alternative to cramming things in your mouth like I do without even noticing them, like Taco Bell. And there's also mindful meditation. I've actually sort of done some of them where you kind of pay attention to sort of different parts of your body, like focus on your toes. What do your legs feel like? What do you hear? So mindfulness as a practice, has become kind of a favorite of Silicon Valley as companies like Google teach their employees how to be mindful, to reduce their stress. Some of its biggest advocates are people like this guy named John Kabat-Zinn. He says not only will it help you deal with these sort of psychological problems, but that teaching people mindfulness will quote unquote revolutionize the world. As we become aware of our surroundings, we become more compassionate, he says. But before I go on, what is, if any, your experience with mindfulness or your opinions of it?
I mean, anecdotally, I used to work at a university that tried to make us teach mindfulness and resilience skills to students. And I was the asshole at a meeting that found that problematic, because what I heard them saying was like, okay, we've created a shitty culture for education and there's a shitty world outside the culture of education where these kids' lives are fucked. But let's like teach them cool mental tricks so they're resilient enough to like not give up, which I found to be really shitty. And my experience of mindfulness in a professional context has often been like that. Like, here's the mental tool to deal with the fact that your immediate world is shitty without you questioning the conditions of the shittiness.
Yeah, we're going to actually talk about that, but
Okay.
I want to see what Serby thinks first.
So I'm a proponent of mindfulness, and I actually practice it.
Awesome.
I was practicing it right before we recorded. I was doing deep breathing and identifying my feelings and tracing it back to why I was feeling that way. So I find it very helpful. I know that it's not for everyone, but I have a very stressful job. So for me, it's easier to take 5 minutes and breathe deeply or do a body scan, and after work, maybe do a guided imagery than to like drink a beer or something to unwind.
Yeah. So the reason I bring
healthy.
this up, this is actually a book I read a while ago. I think I've even mentioned it before. Sorry, we just got a really funny message. We'll pause it for a second. What up, noob? Tony and said, I just want to read my screen name out loud for everyone else. I'll talk about your wonderful donations later. Sorry. I got distracted. A little while ago, I was talking about this book, Mindfulness, by this guy, Ron Purser. I even interviewed him on my other podcast. And the criticism of mindfulness, well, there's a few things going on. I think just to like establish what's going on, I think in general, people agree it's pretty good for dealing with like stress and certain other cases, right? And that if you're a person with like anxiety and it helps you, like that's cool. At least I'm saying that. So I don't want to shit on those people. But I think the problem that he really identifies is exactly what Michael Burns is talking about, where it's like we've created this nightmare institution for stressing children out, but like let's teach them these like mental gymnastics to cope with it. And so like so for him, especially in the context of Silicon Valley, it's creating these like utterly inhumane working conditions, right? You're working 16 hours a day. You have all these crazy deadlines. Maybe you're chronically understaffed and they're not gonna up the staff because budget money, so they're stressing you out. So they've created the system that is designed to screw over your mental health. But instead of fixing those things, like saying, hey, maybe we need to hire more people, hey, maybe we need to create a work-life balance or something like that, they'll sit you down in a seminar and say, like, here's a breathing technique or something like that. So one of his big arguments is that it's kind of like a form of societal control. I think Michael already agrees with that. As a proponent of mindfulness, Serby, what do you think?
So I would not like, so I work at a technology company that is similar to Google. So if my organization started to peddle mindfulness in this way, I would not like it. Because it would be exactly what you said. I would think, well, rather than change our culture, don't like put a Band-Aid on things. And I do feel like when we teach children these resilience skills and mind and stress reduction skills, I think maybe it's like an easy way to get out of things, but I also think that it's a good lifelong coping mechanism. So you can't always change your environment. You can't always change your culture, what's going on around you, but you can change the way you perceive things and the way that you cope with stress. So I do think there is value in teaching students these techniques because, like at my organization, there's nothing I can do about being understaffed or working 7 days a week until midnight.
Mm-hmm.
I can get a different job, but I'm staying there for other reasons. But I can change the way that I look at things and the way that I handle stress and anxiety.
Yeah, I think there's this kind of interesting tension. It's exactly what you're saying, right? Like you can't control these things. But his criticism, and I'm also um, I like understanding of this is that in a way it individualizes problems that should not be individualized, right? Like it's shifting to like, oh, like I need to do these things to deal with the system I can't control, or individuals need to do it. So and you're not advocating this, but for some people it's automatically taking all responsibility and putting it on the individual, right? Like it's not the structure's fault, it's your fault for not breathing right.
Well,
But on the other end, I think he would also probably say, like, it's kind of a distraction because, and I'm not saying you could secretly change your work environment or something like that, but if you think about just society in general, like we could be thinking about all the ways that society is like stressing us out and destroying our mental health, but instead we're kind of distracted by like, oh, here's like a quick fix. And so like I think there's like an interesting tension there. Like again, I'm not shitting on people who use it to deal with these things, but I do think there's that sort of danger there of shifting the focus outside of like where the real problems are.
Well, I think what that just made me think of there, and of course, Serby, like hearing you describe this, of course, I'm not at all opposed to people using any tool like that to stay healthy and happy and mentally fit. That's great. I guess what worries me in a workplace setting is, I mean, let's say I'm working someplace where the hours are getting ridiculous and everyone's feeling burned out. And this is an extreme example, but option one, I go to my little cubby and I do mindfulness for 5 minutes and I get back to the grind. Option two, I talk with my coworkers. We realize we're all feeling that way, and maybe we like link up with a union or something like that, or do something. I know this is extreme, but like often, like there's collective responses to workplace conditions beyond sort of interpersonally dealing with stuff, and that would be, and this is an extreme fear, but a fear that like the internalization of coping mechanisms guides us away from collective responses to those things. And I guess like the related thing there is just, anytime it becomes like commodified, because I think like therapy is awesome and psychoanalysis is awesome and stuff like mindfulness is great. I think whenever it becomes more than like, I guess not just an end in itself, but I think we should view it as something that's good in and of itself when the purpose of it is caring about my mental fitness so that I can be more productive, or so that I can make profit for someone that's not me. That's when I get a little iffy on why we're doing those things.
Oh, I agree with you. I do think that I don't like the burden shift, and that it is put on an individual. And I've worked at startups where the culture is exactly as you describe, and there have been collective responses. But co-founders and executives will not do anything. Mm-hmm. So in those situations, I feel like you need to have a coping mechanism if finding another job is not an option. Yeah. So in my experience, I don't think that like mindfulness is like I do think that organizations are putting the burden on other people, putting the burden on staff members, but they put the burden on staff members for everything, like time management or things like that. Like when I was working until midnight every night, my manager told me, well, let's look at your time management. Maybe you're not managing your tasks well. No, screw you. It's because you're giving me too much work and like the deadlines are too tight. So I think the burden is on staff all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a situation where a plane crashes and the pilot's like, well, the person in 22C was using their phone, so whose fault is it really?
So there's another sort of interesting component around Purser's argument, which is he's got a kind of strange background. He's a professor of management who's like writing this book about how Silicon Valley is screwing everyone over. But he also is a practitioner of, I think, Zen meditation or Zen Buddhism. And another part of his argument is that a big part of the way mindfulness came to America was that it was secularized. People like John Kabat-Zinn said, this isn't a religious thing. Like we sort of like take the wisdom from Buddhism and take away all the religious parts and boom, here's a tool to manage your stress and anxiety. And also appealing to me, right? Because, I'm not a Buddhist. I respect Buddhism, but whatever. Like, I don't want to necessarily be a part of that. But an interesting part of it is that mindfulness in Buddhism is just kind of one component of like all these different sort of rules and teachings and wisdom. And part of those other teachings are like ethical concerns, right? So it's like, how does being mindful and meditation, how does that play into this like larger ethical framework? And by taking away the religious part, people have completely sort of stripped that away. So Ron Purser, what I find are horrifically hilarious examples of the way that like mindfulness can go wrong. And it's only worth bringing up because people like John Kabat-Zinn saying by making people mindful, they'll be more compassionate and there will be a better world, is that not mindfulness per se, but high-ranking members of like the Nazi command would go on meditation retreats. I think it was Hermann Goering, but I could be wrong about the specific figure. But yeah, they would go on Nazi meditation retreats. Or Anders Breivik, the terrorist who shot a bunch of people, I think in his manifesto was talking about how meditation sort of gave him the willpower to like kill all these people. So I think it just speaks to like, again, I'm not saying you're going to meditate and then kill a bunch of people, but I think making claims about it being able to change the world without realizing how that can get super tricky super fast is deeply troubling.
So do you think we should have mandatory background checks before you can meditate?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And then, yeah, go ahead.
I think that it is extreme to say that it will change the world. I think that it can change somebody's life in a more positive way. Or,
but your take on this is very reasonable, just to be clear, Sylvie. Like everything you're saying is like, yeah, like using it as a mechanism to deal with shitty stuff in your day to day and keeping it on top of your own emotional life. Awesome. I think when it becomes a weird revolutionary quasi religious thing is where the iffiness comes in. And I think too, like a lot of this stuff in like corporate and startup culture, there are all these like cultish things happening, whether it's like mindfulness or fitness or like how you eat. Like I was working at a place at one point where everyone was like, "Oh, are you doing keto? We're all doing keto. It's so good. We got to do keto for our productivity. Keto, keto, keto." And like you ate bread and they looked at you like you were just like selling a child. But but I think there's something about contemporary work culture and startup culture in particular. It's always looking for what's the dominating quasi-spiritual or health-focused ideology we can use to like both justify what we're doing and be the ubermensch while we're doing it.
It's like a superficial care and interest they take in their staff members. Like it's like when they say, "Oh, we have like beds and showers and catering and dry cleaning on site to help you." No, you're not helping me. You're doing it so this way I can't ever leave. Like I can't say I need to pick up my dry cleaning or I need to go to the dentist. I had a friend who worked at this huge pharma company and they had a dentist, a hairdresser, a doctor, a nurse on site.
So you never leave.
She could never say I have a doctor's appointment. I have a dentist. They're right there. Mm. So for me, I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm so jaded that now it's like I just assume that no organization really cares about you. Like everybody is out to like squeeze you. So them weaponizing mindfulness in this way doesn't surprise me.
I also think it just plays into the Silicon Valley dogma of we're kind of holier than thou and sort of know what's best. And like part of this facade is because we're mindful, we're so empathetic, like we really know how to listen to people. But like they don't, they know how to. It's mindful of like, did you do your breathing exercise? But you're like, hey, can you stop being understaffed? Like, oh, actually, no. The last thing I'll just say, and we can move on to the next one, is the last part about the trickiness of mindfulness is, so there's a lot of science about research about what mindfulness does. And I think I'm not a psychologist or doing these studies, but when it comes to like stress, anxiety, I think some of the more base things, there's research about it. And Ron Purser makes claims that a lot of the research is not that great or has problems with it, like low amounts, or the people conducting the study are themselves mindful practitioners. So that might be a sort of conflict of interest. But I don't think anyone is trying to say they don't work. But what happens is, because marketing gets involved, right? Not marketing, but like bad science journalism as well, where there is less robust science that's saying mindfulness can do all these other things that there is no evidence to do. And there's even, I don't know if this information is up to date, but of all the different like mindfulness apps out there, only one has sort of been studied. And even that study was like incredibly small. So, if mindfulness works, does mindfulness work on an app is up for debate. And I'd love for people to study that, but companies are making claims without sort of backing them up scientifically. And people might have figured out right now I really hate pseudoscience.
Couldn't tell.
What Up Noob also said mindfulness made me keto through Mercury retrograde.
But see, and that makes sense. That right there makes sense because it all adds up. Because you got to think about the flat Earth.
Anyway, that's the last thing I'll say on that. Let's talk about Seinfeld.
Yeah, you all had such like interesting, I think, sociologically significant topics. This seems so minor, but that's fine. We did all the heady stuff, so we can talk about nothing. So Seinfeld. The big thing that came out this week is that Netflix made a play to acquire the rights to stream Seinfeld for 5 years. They started in 2021. They didn't, because Netflix doesn't publish their numbers, but by all accounts, they paid over $500 million. So we're talking 500 million plus for the rights to this. One of the reasons that Netflix is seen to be doing this is because they are losing streaming rights to The Office and Friends, two of the comedies that are two of their biggest performers. Up until this point, Seinfeld has been on Hulu in America, and it's on Amazon and most of the rest of the world. It's an interesting play because it seems like Netflix is banking the future of their business in a lot of ways on content that is, coming up on 25, 30 years old and people streaming that more so than the creation of like new content, which I think is a little weird. And I kind of have two thoughts on this. I'm curious what you all think. I know at least one person on this podcast is a Seinfeld head. Serby, what's your relationship with Seinfeld?
For the term sign head? No,
sorry. Do you have a relationship with Seinfeld?
I watched Seinfeld growing up, and I did enjoy it. I haven't seen it like since I was maybe like 20.
Yeah.
But I am a fan of Larry David and of the show.
Yeah. Well, I guess like my two thoughts on this are, what does it say about streaming that we're, revolutionizing entertainment and content and media by offering a multitude of digital platforms for the creation of all types of new content, when the most important thing for these companies is acquiring the rights to sitcoms, the newest of which are like 10 years old, most of which are like 20, 25 years old. To me, that seems weird as a business model, and it seems weird about what it says, like culturally, about what we want to consume. The other thing I'm really curious about is the idea that like Seinfeld would compete with The Office and Friends. And here's what stands out to me is that The Office and Friends are both shows that have some narrative through line, that both have a multitude of romantic relationships and on again, off again stuff, and both have an emotional endpoint. So, and while I think I'm much more familiar with The Office than I am with Friends, I think that one could watch the final episodes of both of those, and if you're that type, find yourself crying or something like that, or getting caught up in it. I don't think anyone cried at the finale of Seinfeld, and honestly, if you've ever cried at an episode of Seinfeld, you should get a mindfulness app or something. So what I wonder is, like, can Seinfeld truly compete with the universal appeal and streamability of things like The Office and Friends? Y'all's thoughts on this stuff?
I want to think about the business real quick, because even a few weeks ago there was a Subway ad for Seinfeld, and sort of not tongue-in-cheek because they're paying tens of thousands of dollars for the Subway ad, but it's, what is it, 25 years old now, or 20 years old? It's really fucking old.
Last episode aired in 1998.
Right.
So if you were born when that show came out, you're drinking this year. Oh, when that show ended, sorry.
The point is, there was an ad advertising tune into whatever it was, Pix 11 to watch episodes of Seinfeld, which to me was a bizarre thing. But I guess it works. But I guess my question is like, is this kind of new because back when I had cable or like as a kid, the day was always filled up with syndicated reruns of stuff, right? And that's like how I was introduced to Seinfeld is during the day, get home from school, Seinfeld is on, or all these other shows, Star Trek: The Next Generation, and cable is still like this, right? So is the business model that the daytime programming and they're maybe the advertisement rates are cheaper then, but they're still raking a ton of money from Seinfeld reruns. And then at night they have their sort of original programming. But if you think about it from a time perspective, the like 4 hours on Monday that NBC has, their new block of shows. And I hope you can't date the last time I watched TV was, but that's what I remember being like. That's like a tiny percentage. So like, is this actually that new? Is it? Let's start there.
Well, I mean, I wonder if it's new in terms of money. Like, I don't know how much it cost a local syndicate to pay for the right to air, like Everybody Loves Raymond and Seinfeld and The King of Queens and all those other classics. I think what stands out to me is the massive investment and almost the like streaming wars we're having now over who has access to this stuff. But I totally see what you're saying, Alec, that it's, I guess we always need either our like dumb afternoon shows or our lazy late night shows or whatever it is. Whereas I think initially streaming felt like everything was trying to be primetime television. So that makes sense. And I guess just following that then, and I guess this is maybe for another, our next point of conversation. But then my question would just be, can Seinfeld do as well as some of these other shows have on streaming networks as being the kind of streamable, bingeable dumb shows?
I think so. I think that I think a lot of the concepts in Seinfeld have filtered into like mainstream culture, like a lot of like a low talker or man hands and like things like that. I think that it's quite timeless, some of the things that they discuss. And when you said something about like before when streaming first came out, every show wanted to be primetime. I think there is a shift in the way people stream. There is more of like passive consumption where people will put something on, watch it in the background. Whereas before, I think when Netflix first came out, people were like, oh, House of Cards, like, let me sit down and watch this. Now they have more options for people.
Yeah, but I guess it made me think of this when you brought up the man hands thing. I wonder too, like how well Seinfeld is going to continue to age with, what are the ones called that are younger than millennials? Do we have a name for them?
Generation Z.
Whatever.
Or Zoomers, as I like to call them.
Ugh. Get a job, kids. But no, I wonder, like, Seinfeld is a show about a bunch of, upper middle class white people in New York in the 90s. And I just wonder how well that's, I mean, I know I will always like Seinfeld, but I wonder someone more engaged and young and cool and woke and worldly than myself, if they see like the man hands thing and they're just like, that is offensive.
See, I think Seinfeld, it was sort of on and I never really enjoyed watching it, but I kind of aged into it as I became a cranky old Jew who lives in New York.
Target audience.
Like, there's just some episodes that speak to like my basic existence. Like, I think George stays at a job because he's got a private bathroom that he doesn't have to share with anyone. Like, I would stay at a job if it had a really good bathroom. Currently, I work from home, so I've got the best seat in the house.
So you think the Zoomers will age into this?
They'll age. I mean, if they're anything like me, they'll age into being cantankerous people who don't want to share bathrooms. And so like there's a lot of stuff there. And I think when you watch older stuff, I mean, there's some stuff that's so egregious you're like, ugh. But like there's some jokes in Seinfeld I'm like, oh, that doesn't age well, but like I don't give that much of a shit because I'm kind of gonna give it a pass because it's 20 years old.
Yeah.
And it's fine. Yeah.
I think my only other thought on this, and I was just thinking about this earlier this morning, with spending over $500 million on this, I think 2 sleeper shows, and if you all have a take on this, I'd be very curious. I'm curious what other shows you can think of that would be worth a ton of money for a streaming service to acquire that people could watch over and over for years. I have 2 I'm going to throw out. One, I imagine at least one of you is going to hate, but whatever.
It's The Simpsons.
No. Okay, 1, Scrubs. I think Scrubs has become wildly underrated. I think it holds up really well. It's very funny. It has good storylines, all that sort of stuff. Recently, Shea Serrano wrote a piece on The Ringer about just one scene from Scrubs and how brilliant it is, and I think that's turning some people back onto it. I think that's on Hulu right now. I think Scrubs should be on that pantheon. I also think, rather than Friends in The Office, I would rather watch How I Met Your Mother. I think it holds up really well as a bingeable, streamable, dumb show that hits a lot of those notes without taking itself too seriously. And I could see that continuing to like grow into something, even though the Neil Patrick Harris character is kind of date rapey.
Serby?
I think that Veep and maybe Curb Your Enthusiasm, I think are quite funny, that like you could
Curb
watch
holds up.
and feel like it was light.
Yes. Two properties that HBO has the lock on, but yes.
Not because I like it, but I do think The Simpsons, and I'm not shitting on earlier Simpsons, but I just never got into it. I watched it a lot as a kid and didn't understand most of the jokes, and now don't want to invest in 28 seasons of my life or whatever the fuck number they're at. But the one that I do think will age well. I don't know. I've had a desire to rewatch all of Silicon Valley instead of The Office, and it's one of my favorite shows. And something about it is, in the same way The Office is kind of just like calming and like allows me to go to sleep at night. I tried watching Parks and Rec the last few nights instead of The Office. I love it as much, but it's not as good at that. I feel like Silicon Valley is good at that.
It's a good call. On a related note, has anyone read the Thomas Middleditch interview that came out this week?
No, tell me about that.
Everyone should look this up. I'll just say really quickly, Thomas Middleditch did a 20 questions interview with Playboy. The first 3 questions are about the new season of Silicon Valley. The next 17 are about how he's like a swinger, and all about him and his wife and all these other people going to swingers parties and like the lifestyle, and how he's the gas pedal and his wife is the brakes. And it's so weird. And personally, I think it's so slimy because the takeaway is kind of like, listen, I'm Middleditch and I need to fuck. And
he's the one that's in the Verizon commercials, the really nerdy guy.
Yeah.
The nerdy thing is a great juxtaposition.
Yeah, the nerdy swinger is just wild. So I would just say, if someone needs a fun read, if you just Google like Middleditch interview, I guarantee you it'll come up.
This guy literally fucks.
He really does. It like all adds up.
There was one time I was on Coffee Meets Bagel, and you know the little Asian guy who's on Silicon Valley.
Oh yeah.
That guy, yeah.
John...
We matched. Like I saw him and I was like, it's Jin Yang, and so I like swiped right on him, and we couldn't meet up for whatever reason. He was like traveling or filming or something. But I was like, I'm not attracted to him, but I just kind of want to go out on a date with Jin Yang.
So you're saying you would have gone on a date to develop an opposite sex friendship with him?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what I was hoping for. Because he seems really funny in real life. Like he just seems like a really funny kind of guy.
He's funny stand-up. Funny guy. I think he's from Queens originally. Or not originally, but I think he's like emigrated to Queens and has a funny New York vibe about him.
I thought he'd be fun to hang out with. And not because he's like a celebrity or anything like that. Like that does not faze me.
You saw dollar signs. You immediately Googled Silicon Valley supporting cast pay per episode.
Not rich enough for me.
Cool. Well, I think we should get into voicemails, mailbag, and also I got some donations to shout out. Sorry if I wasn't able to mention these in the stream, but the dude abides, as always.
Love this guy.
What the dude would say. He said, I'm with Alec, gone from lo-fi hip-hop to 80s Tokyo City pop to electro jazz to dark I want to know what dark country is. Now on Eric Idles. Always look on the bright side of life. Thanks, dude abides. Also, we got General Macaba. Thanks for donating. And Antoine Dion, who, let me read this real quick, works for a company that sells psychological support to other companies and universities with the intent to reduce absenteeism. He or she answers 10 to 15 calls or chat from worker and students from all across North America and some other country in the world as well a day. I thought there was another message here. Anyway, thank you for those donations. All right. If anyone wants to leave us a voicemail, the number is 1-213-534-8807. And if anyone would like to email us, the email is culturebinge@wisecrack.co. We read all of them, even if we don't read them on the show because we don't have enough time. But I think we have a voicemail to listen to first.
We do.
From Guido.
From
We want to
Guido.
put that on.
Great. Here it is.
Hi, this is Guido calling from Houston. I just wanted to talk about real quick about the segment you guys did on late bloomers. It really touched me personally because when I was 18, right out of high school, I did not know what I wanted to do, so I went into retail like most people do. And I actually ended up doing really well. Within about 5 years from me starting, I already had my own store. I was the manager of a store. I moved up pretty quickly. I was getting ready to become a district manager around age 26, and that's when I realized that I wasn't happy with what I was doing. So I went back to school, got a degree in communications, and of course I ended up in advertising, which was difficult at first because it was a brand new industry to break into, but I was always happier as a struggling copywriter than I ever was as a successful store manager in retail. A few years later, I am finally found a great job. I have done a lot of pieces for Walmart and McDonald's. It has been super, super fulfilling. So thank you for touching on that. I know that I'm not the latest of bloomer because I was only about 26, 27 when I realized what I wanted to do with my life.
Wait, that's what you want me to do, right?
Thanks for that email. Yeah, no. People send us very long voicemails. If we keep it to like 60 seconds, 70 seconds, 80 seconds, but this voicemail is great. Love to hear stories like that.
That's great.
Serby.
That's so nice. And
Yeah.
I think that's like blooming late is not something we talk about enough. Like we have so much pressure. And so it's nice to hear somebody who like did well and realized that they weren't like super happy and then they did something different. And I think not everybody figures it out early enough. I'm still figuring it out, and that's okay. I don't think you should feel bad about yourself. I think there's this like tendency that if you don't have it figured out at an early age, you can feel kind of depressed and like bad about yourself, and you shouldn't, because life is long and you could have like multiple career changes.
And this is why ABC made the hit show The Rookie for late bloomers out there, where Nathan Fillion plays someone in his 40s just becoming an LAPD police officer. So if
Wow,
you need
what a great
inspiration, if you need inspiration for a late bloomer show, just watch The Rookie this fall on
Wasn't
ABC.
there another like a 40-year-old intern? Like was Robert De Niro the intern?
Well, he was the intern and he was old, but then there was also another time Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson were interns at Google.
Right.
In the documentary The Internship, which was thrilling.
It's never too late.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the emails. I realized I didn't send these to Michael, so I'll read them. But the first one's an email from Marcus. Marcus says, I want to share my views from episode number 16 in relation to the blooming later in life article Serby mentioned. As a Swede, I heard my thoughts were especially requested. So from observing the situation in my own country, I would say the Swedish perspective, personal fulfillment versus professionalism, is that there are expectations on having things planned early on in life. However, there is an acceptance towards a high school graduate if they feel like taking a year off or more and postpone college education to instead do something else like work abroad, study abroad, travel work. I cannot say what initially started this, but what made my choice easier to take a year off to live in Beijing was the fact that other students had also had thoughts on having some gap years. I do think it is necessarily about, I don't think it's necessarily about the country itself. Rather, I think it comes down to how the network you surround yourself thinks. So with that in mind, I would love to hear you guys discuss how, if possible, countries could be able to sway public opinion in the matter of professionalism and personal fulfillments. Thanks for entertaining episodes. Marcus the Swede.
Nice.
Hi, Marcus the Swede.
Are we supposed to respond to that? Oh, go ahead.
Can you read the question again, please?
How countries can like sway public opinion about the sort of professionalism and personal fulfillment thing. I just have a quick thought, which is in the US, it's also, I think, common, especially for kids with a little bit more money, to take a gap year. But if anything, it's just become like a weird mandate to put on your Yale application, right? Like it makes you, I'm going to go to Beijing, so it looks more appealing on my application. So like I'm all for gap years if you can afford them, but I think the way we're doing it is still wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it just boils down to simply making life more affordable. No, you know what I mean? Like, I think if our society had more mechanisms by which you didn't have to like go right into college or right into a job, and there was some form of like social, financial safety net that encouraged more freedom and placed an emphasis on freedom and exploring one's interests, then I think that would be good and could lead to some sort of societal shift.
I think that instructors, like teachers and adults, should also play a bigger role in this by telling young people that you don't have to go to college right away. Like, I think there was this idea when I was in high school that there was like this assumption that yes, when you graduate in May and you start college in August, and there was somebody who was taking a gap year because they didn't know what to do, they didn't feel ready for college, and he was said, I hate that she always says that I'm starting college in August. So I think instructors need to take a more active role in providing other options to kids and let them know that they don't have to go to college. They can go to a trade or figure it out or take some time. And parents too should maybe have bigger conversations with children.
I took a gap semester, which was just me missing a deadline and working in a restaurant and realizing how shitty that was.
So it helped you become who you really are.
Yeah, that guy still owes me like $1,000. I was not paid in a timely fashion.
What? Say his name right now. Everyone in the comments, find him. Get
No,
Alex money.
I don't want to dox this Frenchman I used to work for.
He's
who would
French.
smoke in the office.
Okay.
Yeah, he would smoke in the office and be like, "You stupid Americans," and not smoking in the workplace. I'm like,
Okay.
I don't want to breathe this in. Anyway,
We need a French smoker who hates Americans. That should be easy to narrow down.
he did kind of hate Americans. All right. Before I get the next email, we also got another donation from Non-Servium who says, even if you figure things out, even if you figure things out, things change, so you should always be trying new things. I'm ready to go at a moment's notice when something takes off.
Hell yeah.
We got a lot of cool responses about the late blooming thing, but I do want to switch gears to an email from Agnes about tipping culture. Agnes says, your takes on tipping really got me going. Also late blooming, but we're not going to get into the late blooming thing with this email. Your tipping culture is one of the main characteristics that comes up when people make fun of the U.S., at least here in the Eastern Europe. Having said that, the questions around tipping are present here, and I think everywhere as well. It's just that the livelihood of people in the food service industry does not come from tips because of the stricter European labor regulations, which of course is not a black and white issue. Anyhow, I personally am against tipping in any way as a habit of appreciation and as a system that is supposed to provide servers and tires wages. I've yet to hear any argument as to how serving food and alcohol is a distinct form of labor from any other in the sense of compensations. There are tons of jobs that deal with customers of any kind, customers of any kind may or may not be satisfied by the service, but expressing this in tips is restricted solely to the restaurant culture. Why don't we tip government agency workers or bus drivers, or the guy who answers the phone at the customer service center if our package has not been delivered? In cases like these, we don't have to think about the fact that it is not our job to contribute to these employees' proper wages. If we're not satisfied with the service in any way, there are ways to signal that. And that is better from a business owner's perspective, too. Customer dissatisfaction in the form of tipping or lack thereof will not likely reach management, while online rating, a book of complaints, not spending your money there afterwards, or I'd like to talk to the manager, will improve the quality of the establishment. The existence of tipping is really baffling to me. In Japan, tipping is considered to be offensive, and I can really see why. Thanks for your conversation. Michael is awesome, but we missed the hell out of Jared. Bring Jared back. Sorry for the long email. Greetings from Hungary, Agnes.
Thanks for the preface of saying that something nice about me before you said bring Jared back.
I know, that was so sad.
Like, Jared's like really great, and I agree, but that just made me feel slightly better than it could have. But see, I just think that, like, I get what they're saying there, but I mean, it is just it's not only a cultural thing in the United States, and I think it does apply. Correct me if I'm wrong. We tip other people too. Like, I feel like a lot of like laborers that do any sort of,
Movers.
Movers. I used to work as a tour guide, and I basically lived off tips. But part of, I think, in that sense, because the base pay was kind of shitty, it was like, cool, I'm going to put some effort in. I'm going to be nice, give people recommendations for what to do afterwards, blah, blah, blah. So it creates that motivation to do that. But I think sometimes when people in Europe kind of shit on us for the tipping culture, they should also understand that, like, yeah, people that work in restaurants and bars don't get paid. In some cases, they literally do not get paid unless it's tips. So let's be critical of those industries explicitly and not of America as a whole.
Yeah, my argument is always like, always tip 20%. However, we should, as a culture, decide to like when restaurants decide to like ban tips and instead just do a flat 18% fee or whatever. Great, love it, fine with that. Or jack up the prices and don't tell me about it. I don't care. Serbi's shaking her head, but we can talk about that later. But I think where it came from, I've heard several different things. One was like it was a German medieval practice, and I don't know how true this is, about you were essentially giving them money so that they could like afford a drink with you after their shift or like eat a meal. Which like I guess like I'm fine with the like, hey, I'm drinking like and talking to the bartender after work, like I'll buy him a beer. That's cool. But as far as like you have to depend on my generosity to make a living, even though you're still doing your job. But it is weird. And, I talked about tip creep. It makes me think more and more like, yeah, I'm used to tipping like movers or obviously like restaurant staff and all that stuff. But then there's all ones that like I don't know about. And then the Square devices will pop up asking for a tip on like, the person like the serve your own froyo place where they just weighed my froyo and, the tip. And I'm not saying that they should get paid a good rate, but I'm like, whoa, what's happening here,
Yeah. A fun alternative to tipping, if you ever can, is gift tipping. I'll give you an example. If you ever go to like a BYOB restaurant in particular, but not even that, but a lot of smaller places, if you bring booze for the kitchen, people love that. And
but then like they're like, I make $5 an hour. I need money, not booze.
I don't know. I've had some fun meals where you bring a bottle of something for the kitchen and then they take care of you pretty well. And it's a way to show appreciation. If they were going to, spend the money on buying some whiskey after work anyways, let's just cut the middleman out. But don't do that for like a bus driver or a pilot.
Serbi, any thoughts before we move on to the next one?
I have very strong feelings about tipping, but I feel like if I share them, everybody's going to be like, oh, Serbi hates humans and hates tipping.
No, they're just going to think that you love rich men and hate working class people. It's not everyone.
Okay, fine. I don't like tipping culture, and I think it's bizarre that we do so. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Australia, and he was talking about how much he hates his job and was interested in, he was like, maybe I'll quit and I'll just become a waiter. And I was like, what?
Like, I make like $30 an hour there, right?
Yeah. And he was like, oh no, I would have like a great life. Like I could afford my house. I could afford to like have a normal life where I can do things. And that was bizarre to me. And I told him that in the States, like you would have to have like 2-3 jobs maybe, or, maybe you would have to work like 7 days a week. And he talked about how in Australia and in Europe, it's not like that. So I think it's shitty that we don't pay servers well. The other thing is that I hate that there's this expectation and there's this entitlement that you have to tip. For example, when I go get my hair done, so I have to pay like $85 for my haircut, and then I'm expected to tip her 20%. Like, I don't understand, like, why do we have to tip people? Like, if that's your job, and she is the proprietor. And what I've decided is that I will no longer tip the proprietor because you get a cut off of all the profits. So why should I tip you?
There's technically something in old school tipping culture that you never tip the owner, and it's like passe to do so. However, not every owner knows that and will still be mad at you if you don't tip them.
Yeah. So I stopped tipping the lady who threads my eyebrows, and she was not very happy. And it's been 2 years and I still don't tip her. And I'm like, no, chick, you own 3 shops. I know how much money you make. I know where you live. You live in like a huge mansion. Like, what is my?
How do you know where she lives? Did you track down this person's real estate data to be sure of this?
No, she was telling me.
Oh, so when you go to a restaurant, you're not just like, what's your address? I'm going to Zillow it to see if you're worthy of tips.
No, she was telling me like, oh, I just moved into this house in this neighborhood or whatever. And I'm like, Oh, wow.
But see, I just could
that's
never not
great
tip
idea.
someone who was performing a service on me or for me that was significant. Like if I had a car, I would feel like if I didn't tip, they were gonna like leave a brake thing unfinished, and I would die in a horrific accident. If I was getting a beard trim or something, I would just think like, if I don't tip you, you might do a shitty job. So I'd rather just tip you.
I still tip, but I do so unhappily.
So you give the money and saying like, I don't want to give this to you, and I don't feel good about it, but take the money.
Yeah, like restaurants, I understand that they don't make much money. They survive on tips. Like I tip at restaurants. But when I go to like a self-serve froyo place and the little thing turns around, I will hit zero. Like you didn't do anything. I mean, I get it that you're like cleaning up the shop and stuff, but you didn't, what service did you provide me other than keeping an establishment clean, which is a normal aspect of your role because of health standards. Like that, I don't feel like you went above and beyond or did anything. And even serving my food, like you literally brought it from the kitchen to the plate. Like you didn't do anything for me.
You better
now
hope
I'm
restaurant
just coming
workers
off, like, so
Can we do a
mean.
special
You
3-hour
kinda
live
are. I
stream
mean-
where we just talk with Survey about tipping and just keep listing different things? I could listen to this for days.
Yeah. As someone who works in restaurants, it's incredibly difficult work. And like, I think waiters should get paid lots of money, but at the same time, there's other incredibly hard. Like, I've heard stories about people who work in retail who get screamed by customers all day. So I'm kind of like, when I was, in high school and in college or before college, waiting tables, I was fucking making bank, like in cash, walking away with like $100 a night for like, I was making $20, $30 an hour, which is awesome for a person who doesn't, have a college degree and doesn't have bills to pay. So it was awesome. However, in retrospect, I hear like there's a subreddit about it's like nightmares from retail or horrors from it's just horror stories about working in retail. Those people get screamed at all day. They like have to help people find the thing, and then the people still scream at them. And I'm just like, why do I deserve that $20 or $30 or even $40 an hour, like on a good day, and like they don't. So yes, I don't get mad when I have to tip, except when tips start creeping up everywhere, and I just wish they would charge me more. Like a haircut, just charge me more money, right? Like I'm gonna tip you $5 or $10, just charge me $5 or $10 more and put it in your pocket.
Yes, I agree. Like I think it's I think it's like the idea of like, so like now I have to like build that into like the cost. Like I don't know. It really upsets me.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that I'm very kind to people. I'm very
It sounds like it, yeah.
So if somebody,
Bitch, I know where you live, but here's $3. I'm kind.
I'm really nice to everybody. I don't like the tipping culture. I like how it is in Europe. Like everything is built into the cost.
Yeah, you know what's also great in Europe? Service. Oh wait, it's not.
It's not, no. But I don't expect it. Like I would rather have somebody just like give me my food and walk away than have somebody give me my food and walk away, still be rude to me, but still be expected to tip 20%.
This is the last thing I'll say before we go on the last email. Also about tipping culture, is it's so amazing. In New York, every server is a dick. And like they do their job extremely well. Like they're faster, they like remember your order and don't fuck it up. Like it's just like smooth, efficient service, but there's like no frills to it. They're just like, what do you want? Okay, thank you, bye. But like you go to the South and they're like, hey, how are you? Like, let's talk about the weather and all this shit. And I think I prefer the cold New York method. Anyway,
LA's in the middle. It's very like performative, and people say nice stuff, but it's fake, and they're just working on lines for their audition in the back, but they're like chatty and nice.
Yeah. Anyway, the last email is from Alan, who is talking about delivery services. Alan just wanted to share another perspective on delivery services. I live in a third world country. The traffic in my city is one of the worst in the entire world, and I find these services to be incredibly useful both to the users and the restaurants. I agree there are some downsides, but we should see the benefits services like this provide. Number one, it's cheaper. Getting delivery saves you time, gas, parking, and most importantly, drinks, which typically make up around 30% of the total. And the delivery fee is like $1.50 USD. Definitely understand that. LA, you got to pay the valet person. God, I hate LA. Anyway, while it might be an unfair system with delivery people, the service makes it possible for many small restaurants to compete with big chains with minimal investment. Then sadly, in some countries, it's not always safe to walk or even drive, especially at certain hours or specific places. And finally, they're a great way to help people avoid drinking and driving. So yay. Loving the podcast. My favorite one so far, Alan.
Huh. Interesting. Some good points there. The drinking and driving thing I don't get as much, but where Alan is from, maybe there's different like cultural differences on stuff like that. Because I don't get delivery booze.
Well, you go out to eat and you drink and then you drive home.
I guess. I don't drive, so it doesn't really apply. Yeah, but with all that, I just think the one thing I still think about is just the drivers and all this. So when we're like, oh, where I live is really dangerous, so I don't have to leave the house, my one thought is still, well, the driver still has to be cruising around with money on hand probably in this dangerous city. So that's what I would worry about in that context.
You know, I thought this was a really sweet email, and now you're just ruining it for me,
No,
Mike.
it is really sweet. I like it. I'm just thinking about it from the other side of things. Alan, you're great. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that to be negative at all. It's an interesting take on all of this. I'm sorry. I'm never coming back. We'll get Jared back in here. I'll never be here again. I'll never have to see my damn face or hear my fucking voice.
No, stay forever. I really like this email because it reminded me of when I lived in South Side Chicago, which is not a very safe area. And there were times where I wanted to eat something, but I didn't feel comfortable walking out alone because I was afraid of like getting killed. And I ordered food, and it was nice to be able to like go down and like get my food and feel safe. And from my experience, the delivery drivers they seemed more equipped to like handle any sort of like uncomfortable encounters. So I liked it. I thought it was nice and it reminded me. So thank you for writing in and providing your perspective.
The one part of tipping culture I'll stand by is giving the delivery guy extra money when it's raining because you're being a lazy asshole and don't want to get wet. They deserve extra money.
So I always tip the
100%.
delivery driver very well.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone live, everyone listening. We love you all. My name is Alec. I'm on Twitter at Wisecrack Alec. Michael is on Twitter at Michael O'Burns.
We got it. That's the one.
And Surrey something?
Surrey Patel 22. Tweet
on
me.
Twitter.
We can be friends.
Tweet her.
Yeah. So thank you all much. We'll see you next week, I think, or we might be off. We'll figure that out later. See you all later.
Bye.